Hi, as Brad mentioned, my name is Melissa Bodford. I'm clearly no longer with Accenture because I'm not in a business suit any longer, which has been a nice welcome change. As he mentioned, I am one of the co-founders and CEO and chairman of UBAC. We are a digital mobile platform that looks to engage individuals, companies, and nonprofits in a single ecosystem. I won't get into too much detail about what we do, but the net goal of everything that we do with our digital technology platform is try to make it more seamless and more efficient in philanthropy. The trends, which we'll talk about today in philanthropy, have significantly started to evolve. Most people, if you are engaged with nonprofits, you're probably still seeing very traditional mediums to engage with nonprofits, such as paper pledge cards that you fill out. And we'll talk through around the behaviors of the nonprofit industry, how essentially they're 15 years behind where we used to be in consumer industry. So thinking about Alexa today and Amazon, the nonprofit world doesn't operate that way just yet. We're hoping through digital technology that we are accelerating the pace, that they'll be able to do so, but that's the challenge that we are focused on. So that being said, with that context, the topic that I want to talk about today is actually consumer-driven philanthropy. So consumer retail, digital principles, and how our purchasing power, what could that actually do and can do today in the world of philanthropy. In specific to corporate social responsibility, if you are an employee of a company, you're probably very familiar with workplace giving programs or volunteer days or jeans days, days of service, these traditional mediums of how companies engage to do social good. We'll talk through how that's actually changing. I think I'm a little controversial in saying that workplace giving is dying, if not already dead. And so what is the impact of that as a company when you want to be a certified B Corp or you want to do a one-for-one model, which also again, if I can be so bold, is also dead and probably not worth the headache to go through creating those certifications. But that being said, we'll talk through all of that and the implications. So we'll start off just setting the context about philanthropy, the data, the numbers around the industry so that you can understand the scale and the opportunity that our nonprofits have and our companies have to really do good through the individual. We'll talk through the digital landscape, and again, I'm sure folks are very well aware in terms of smartphones and usage, but really the impact of what digital has done to various industries across the market, and you'll notice how absent philanthropy is as its own silo. We'll talk about the digital impact on philanthropy, the trends that have started to occur around the world, and some just really great technology that we have yet to see even come here in the US. And then really, why should companies care? And that gets back to the revenue, the brand recognition, customer loyalty, that there's really a quantifiable impact in the return on investment for your company, leveraging the power of its employees as individuals to do good. So that being said, some high-level numbers, the first of which is 8 seconds. So when I started on this journey coming out of Accenture, understanding the behavioral and the impulses of why do people want to give was important. Today, one of the numbers I didn't have up here, but 47% of all giving opportunities are attempted and then abandoned through a website, through mobile technology, so like a text to give. And what happens is that it's abandoned right at the point of financial currency, right at the point of you entering in your credit card. So if you can imagine taking Uber today, and every time you take an Uber ride, you would have to enter in your credit card. That's the way philanthropy works today. And that's challenging because the altruistic impulse to want to help someone, so to want to do good, only lasts 8 seconds. So research shows that you only have 8 seconds between your frontal lobes recognizing, oh, someone's asking me for help, and then a physiological response, either empathy or apathy. Am I going to do something or not? And the most tangible real-life example is probably the guy on the street that you see, right? That's that impulse that you have. So if you think about that, combined with let's fill out a paper pledge form, that's the challenge our nonprofits face is the 8 seconds happens, you start the paper pledge card, and you can't even finish it because life happens. So So that gets to also this one-to-one engagement model. If you engage with nonprofits today, you'll notice that when you go to a gala, and let's say that they're having an auction, you have to download BidPal to participate in that event. And then when you want, if you belong to a religious institution, so that's on a Saturday night you go to the gala, and then on Sunday you go to your religious institution, you have to fill out a different form to make your weekly contribution. And then on Monday you have a friend that sends you a GoFundMe page to contribute, and you fill out your financial information again. That's that concept of, again, thinking about Uber. Would you fill out your credit card over and over and over, when the reality is your financial currency is not changing? And that's the problem with the one-to-one model today, is that you engaging with schools and charities and religious institutions, they're not storing your financial currency in a way that allows you to capture the 8-second moment. The compounded problem is that the market is growing in philanthropy. So last year, $281 billion was given by individuals. That's about 78% of the actual market, so 300 whatever billion on top of that is actually what's given today in the US alone. But if you remember the very first statistic I talked about that wasn't on the screen, the 47%, 47% are attempted and abandoned, so that 281 number should actually be higher. It actually should be around 175, 178. That's the market. That's the missed opportunity that nonprofits are facing today because they can't capture the 8 seconds and they're not storing the financial currency. So then you bring in the corporate workforce, which is essentially captured dollars that companies from a CSR, so corporate social responsibility program, want to give away. They want all of you as employees to log into a different platform, fill out the information, but the problem there is, does anyone know what an EIN number is? That's the tax ID, that's associated. And then you have to basically justify that you did make this transaction back on Saturday night at an auction. And then it takes about 6 months before the revenue actually is delivered to the nonprofits. And that's a challenge for our nonprofits today, is that they know there's matched dollars that are out there. But when only 9% of the US workforce is taking advantage of dollars that's hostage, that has to be given away for a company for tax purposes, because they're a certified B Corp, or because they have a one-to-one model, or because they just want the tax benefit, that's the opportunity that's missed on the table, that companies are not able to get their employees to participate. So that 281 number, only 6% today actually goes through a mobile channel. So that shows you, again, everything is still being done on print, on paper. The traditional mailings that show up to your house that, unfortunately, I know there's some nonprofits in the room, we all throw away. And then remind ourselves, oh, we'll give, and then we never give, because back to the 8 seconds. So all of these numbers start to compound the problem that's happening. And the final one, it's not a number, it's more of the characteristic of the industry, is that today nonprofits primarily use events, an event-driven trigger to raise money. A catastrophe, an auction, a gala, a race, a golf tournament. I mean, just come up, and most nonprofits average around 5 a year. And that's their primary source of revenue. And if you think about nonprofits and with their time and resource and capacity, they only have time to capture the revenue they know they're going to be able to bring in. And that's through the 5 events. What our challenge and our purpose in this industry now is to basically show you should be able to capture dollars anytime, anywhere, by not having me log in to a platform while I'm at work and then go to a different platform when I'm at home. But that mobility and digital platforms and technologies today can allow me to engage with nonprofits anytime, any place within seconds. Okay, so here's the traditional view of corporate CSR programs, and hopefully this resonates with some folks in terms of there's usually in CSR these preferred partners from a nonprofit standpoint. The most recognizable partner is United Way. Here in Charlotte, typically that's the fall season when all of us as companies, we run around and we ask our employees to please give to United Way. And then in the spring, it's the Arts and Science Council. That tends to be the big cultural push here in our city. Again, the focus from a CSR perspective is we have a budget, a 1X, we need to give out the funds, we're going to do everything through these mandated, corporate-driven pillars. So for example, at Accenture, the pillars for us was anything related to skills to succeed. So technology, dress for success, anything around that. The challenge, though, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, is as employees, that may not necessarily be what I'm personally passionate about. And so there's this gap, right? We know there's funding there to be able to give to workplace giving programs, but most companies today are giving to what they believe and what they care about, and that's absolutely good. But you have a workforce out there that actually likes puppies or wants to work with the food bank, right? And so there's a gap and a disparity, and I'll talk about how digital is bringing all of that together. The purpose of consumer-driven CSR, and this is our perspective, which we'll talk through how we arrive to this, is that if you use your employees as consumers of where they are going, where their purchasing power is, because I'm purchasing a membership at the YMCA because I believe in the mission of the YMCA, why couldn't my firm match what I'm naturally doing as part of my consumer everyday life? If I walked into Dilworth Running Company, we'll talk about this as an example, and I'm purchasing running shoes, did I know, for example, Nike gives away $110 million every year in the country? The average consumer does not know that. Again, Nike gives to what their pillars of their program believes. But if I walked into Dilworth Running Company and I learned, hey, if I purchase your running shoe over other competitors, Reebok, Adidas, Puma, whoever, and you'll give my school, my daughter's school, $25, I think I'm going to be purchasing Nike. So that same budget that's in the traditional CSR now becomes an amplifier effect to grow revenue, increase customer brand, customer loyalty, but most importantly, increase and amplify community impact. Because again, as a consumer, not that I don't care that Nike gives away, whatever those great causes that they give to, it just hits home a little bit more when it's something that I'm personally passionate about. So, to talk about the digital landscape, and I'm sure this is, I'll probably go through these next few slides a little bit at a quicker pace because we all are pretty digital. But if you look at just the key ways in which we live our lives, so learning and shopping and working and traveling and exercise, whatever it is, we're always doing it digitally. Whether American Airlines to check in, or Alexa, or Amazon to purchase our retail goods, whatever, we're using some sort of digital medium. But if you notice, philanthropy is absent. Yes, they have websites that we go to, and yes, we'll talk about the other vendors in this space. But the challenge is this interconnected, the ease of use and the seamlessness to remove the friction of engaging with those nonprofits. That one-to-one model exists today, which digital hasn't yet impacted. So why is this important? Because when you think about the consumption by the individual, so some of the stats, 77% of all Americans at the end of last year had smartphones. Like, we clearly all live and die by our smartphones. 8 billion times across the country, that's the number in our entire all employees that live here that are actually looking at their phones every day. As a parent, what I think is more telling is last month a study came out that it actually shows that children and adolescents spend a total, a minimum of 10 hours a day looking at their phones. Which, if you think that they're sleeping and in school, they're literally, that's all that's left is looking on your phone. And so that's a very scary statistic that unfortunately the generation behind millennials are facing. Transactions, so again, I think we're all well aware of, even with banking and Erica that's coming with Bank of America, it's only going to get easier with voice recognition to be able to speak, paying your bills or looking at your account. Everything we do from a transactional standpoint happens on our phone. And then finally, the accessibility to information, and we'll talk a little bit about the digital myth of the consumer buyer, how the impact in this VW model that we scour the market through our phones before we make a purchase. So when you think about the fact that our habits and our behaviors and our expectations and our mental model of how we engage, and there's some stats on here around branding, 14% of all global economic activity happens online or through a phone. The third of the world, 2.4 billion people transact on a phone daily. It shows that there is a clear need for this industry, the industry being philanthropy, to get on board as quickly as possible. When you talk to several nonprofits around, are you digital, they will say, well, we have a website, it's mobile responsive, and then we use all these other vendors to be able to transact and engage with the younger generation. But the reality is there's a wonderful statistic that shows 87% or even it's close to 90% of smartphone users are actually over the age of 65. So when you think about donors, and traditionally they're going after the older, more established, affluent in terms of charitable contributions, looking for that final phase of life to leave a legacy, they're even on phones. They're also using Uber to send Uber to go pick up their grandchildren at school. Okay? So The disruption, I think we're all well aware, and our CTO, John Pesavento, is here, and he knows this in just great detail. But looking at how each of the individual industries was disrupted because of the move into digital. One of the more recent notable examples, and I even say recent, even though Blockbuster went away years ago, but is Netflix. Right? Netflix and Hulu, the ability to change how we view movies, how we view TV shows. I mean, that's also now disrupting the cable industry. But again, when you look at the fact that these industries have been disrupted, and this is years ago, where's philanthropy? And that's the opportunity that philanthropy plays. So this is more of a base slide to level set that, you know, the digital ecosystem, and again, probably many of us here are involved in technology in some form or fashion, is made up of the businesses themselves, the customers, and then the devices. So how do we engage and interact? Who are the players involved? And then what's the interchange that's happening between the business and the digital consumer? And so understanding that ecosystem and how we play, a lot of companies today, and there's been just a lot of work around design thinking in terms of shifting the consumer behavior, but there's this myth that happens that this is what I do as a digital buyer. I go in, I'm educating myself on the product that I'm looking to buy, I find a solution of where am I going to purchase that item, and then, you know, I make the purchase, I end up calling customer support, where's my package? So this very, if you will, linear model of how a digital consumer goes after purchasing a product. The reality is that it's really this VW model. So we all go to Amazon, we find a product, and then what do? We go down and we see what other people have read, the feedback. Did anyone else believe, you know, is this a good product or not? And then you'll see to the side, if you like this, you go look at this other product. So you jump out and you go look at the other product. Then you see the other product, you read the reviews again, and someone said, oh, go to this website to get more research. So then you go out to that website. And so this up and down model that's constantly happening to source and curate that information before we make a decision. If you take this model, and again, this is just meant to show, you know, the up and down effect. Do we do that in philanthropy? Like, do we do that when we engage with our nonprofits? Do we go and check and see the reviews of our nonprofits and then go back and forth? And that's the type of behavior, like, do we engage that way with the product? Are we purchasing integrity? Are we purchasing respect? Are we purchasing food? We don't engage that way. So how do we create an ecosystem that we start to engage with our nonprofit as a consumer product company? So this leads to examples, ourselves included, right? We are a digital ecosystem where companies and nonprofits and individuals come and play all together. But there are other companies out there that are also attempting to transform this space. The first one is Social Swipe. I don't know if folks have heard of this technology. It's actually overseas in more of the Western European countries, so the UK and France have them. But essentially, they are interactive billboards. The screenshot's a little blurry, but what it actually is the original screenshot is a woman. So human trafficking, it's a woman with her hands bound together. You insert your credit card and it separates the human ties. And so think about it though, this is a billboard that's actually placed in airports, in the metro, in the tube. Like, that's how digital is changing. You're not thinking about human trafficking when you're waiting for, you know, the subway stop to come up, right? But again, back to impulse, back to 8 seconds. If this is something that you care about, you're going to stop. Oh, wait, it's as simple as me just sticking in my credit card. Again, seconds. I don't have to fill out a form. I don't have to sit there and stand in line. Well, maybe actually in this scenario you might. But, you know, swipe your card and you keep going. The other billboard they have is actually loaves of bread. So it's a bread. And when you swipe your credit card, it cuts the bread. It cuts the slice, the loaf, the piece off. And you're essentially purchasing food for a family in a third world country. So it's just creative marketing and, again, digital impact that takes it outside of the nonprofit that otherwise they'd be sending, you know, you a flyer, you go to their website, make the donation. Another example is a charity alarm clock. So this is iCuckoo. This is technology also overseas. Essentially what it is, and you know, there's hits and misses with everything, right? Including the work that we do. But in this one, it's very plain. It's very boring. Design, very simple. But the concept of this is the more you snooze, so this becomes your alarm clock. So again, we all use our alarm clocks on our phone. The more you snooze, every time you hit snooze, the money goes up that you give to your nonprofit. So again, very, very creative. Think about how we live our lives every day, and they've now integrated the ability to give back into something we do all the time. Again, challenges, right? Because you can only pick certain nonprofits that you can do this with. You can't do it with any of your nonprofits. But clearly the National Literacy Trust, which was the first one, benefiting, you're snoozing. That's the first, increment that goes out, then it goes up 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 sterling, what have you. So it's creative. VR experiences. So I think this is starting to show more in the U.S. I know Paula's here, she's had experience with this as well. Where this is actually Pencils of Promise. This is Adam Braun's charity that essentially is providing school supplies to children all around the world. It's a very recognizable nonprofit. And what they did at their gala event, you can sort of see that people are really dressed up. So this is their annual signature event. They actually created a VR experience. So at the time of the live ask, at the time when you're normally hearing the stories and the pull on the heart that happens, they actually partnered with Oculus to create the video so that you could actually experience what it's like to go to school and not be able, and literally the teacher handing an assignment and you can't complete the assignment because you don't have school supplies. The other notable example is Charity Water. So their mission is around providing clean water all around the world. Another very recognizable nonprofit, same thing. During the live ask, the time to understand the impact of what they're doing, they did a VR experience. So everyone's sitting there in black ties. You put the VR goggles on and you experienced walking to go carry water. And so what that experience looked like, the video has leeches, and you see the girl trying to, what that experience was like for her and her father. And again, it's a compounding effect, right? She can't go to school, which women show that the impact that we have on the economic environment, and so on and so forth. But what's great is that these are real life experiences that are happening. Now, the question that comes up when I talk about these sometimes is, well, wait a minute, think about your nonprofit who may not have the funds to be able to obtain technology like this. There's actually some very reasonable priced options and some great companies that actually do partner with nonprofits to bring these experiences to life. Race events and golf tournaments. So if you recall from the original slide, I talked about event-driven. Like, this still continues to be the primary source of revenue for nonprofits. This is an example, actually, of us, of how we've worked with nonprofits today, that using two very common examples, races and golf tournaments. So races today essentially are race registration. So I'm going to sign up to run the race, let's say Susan G. Komen, and then they run around and go get a bunch of corporate sponsorships. And that's it. That's the two revenue channels that come in. What we have done now is, yes, you can still keep your race registration, your corporate sponsorship. Our purpose of our platform is, again, not to cannibalize what you already know you're going to get in. It's meant to amplify. We now have the ability, in working with them, if you think about a Susan G. Komen race route, to work with merchants. So that the average community who's walking into Amelie's, who has no idea the Susan G. Komen race is happening, they see that if they make a donation to Susan G. Komen for $5, Amelie's will give them a free cup of coffee. So again, this is how you broaden, because everything is now on your phone and digital. How you broaden your donor base, how you broaden your awareness, but most importantly, you're capturing more dollars based upon the consumer behavior of what we're doing every day. You do not have to be limited to just the people who signed up to your race and the 15 companies that sponsor everything. Same with golf tournaments, so same model. Three main ways: sign up to play, get the corporate sponsor, and maybe before you play, you purchase the mulligan packet, right? So it's like, there's like a pride pack of 4 mulligans, 2 t-shirts, whatever it is. The problem is when you're actually on the course, what if I actually want a mulligan and I can't purchase that now because I'm not standing in line with the square and doing that before the event? And so today, now they have the ability to transact because, again, everything is through your smartphone in seconds. I'm not having to pull out my credit card on the golf course to purchase the mulligan. So all of it's connected. But the amplifier effect is the ability to gamify the golf course. So if we all remember when we played putt-putt, you know, it's always about getting the ball through the Ferris wheel, and there's always this fun gamification around it. Holes 1, 5, 7, 12, 17, each foursome, who's ever the furthest from the pin, even you could have the worst shot, best shot, hit a tree, you have to donate $100. So now all of a sudden there's more ways to create more fun on the golf course that actually becomes a revenue driver for the nonprofit. Okay, so now that we've gone through the digital landscape, the changes that are happening in the philanthropic industry, why should companies care? So why should a CSR program today, who is giving away money through workplace giving programs, actually want to care about the digital impact of philanthropy? The first of which, and you can kind of see this dichotomy here around, I mean, caring is a competitive advantage. We all know if you are viewed as a giving company, and I'll talk about some of the stats in a minute, it has a quantifiable metric and return for your company. It is a competitive advantage. The challenge is companies are doing it all the time and nobody knows about it. So nobody knows about Nike, nobody knows what Disney does except maybe the Make-A-Wish kid that shows up during a segment on Good Morning America. Again, think about recognizable brands, but even think about the smaller and mid-sized companies today that do good, not raising that awareness or not getting that recognition. And that 9%, which actually this year or last year dropped to like 7%, translates to around $10 to $11 billion left on the table every year. So go back to the numbers I talked about before, where 47% of giving opportunities by individuals, that translate to 170 whatever billion dollars, is now compounded on top with the companies. Because companies want to give away the money, they just don't know where to give away the money to, and they're doing it and nobody knows about it. So some of the stats that reflect this and why should companies care around this trend that we're seeing with the death of workplace giving and this rise of consumer-driven philanthropy is the fact that $12 billion was spent in Q1 alone in the US in consumer retail. Imagine how much you bought today, that everything you bought, not the Harris Teeter model where you walk in, purchase groceries and link to your daughter's school. I mean, but what if you wanted to give it to your church? What if you wanted to give it to your friend who literally just asked you for funding for pediatric cancer? So everything that you're purchasing today could have some consumer philanthropic element, but most importantly, it could be matched by that company. I'll talk about that in a minute. I mentioned the stat before with the $281 billion that's given today by individuals. 90%, so 90% of all shoppers worldwide want to shop at a company that's doing good. And 85% of all shoppers will switch companies once they find out that company is doing good. Now the problem is, for example, Athleta just came out a week ago maybe. They're certified B. Awesome, but our expectations as consumers is everyone is doing good. And that's because companies like TOMS and Warby Parker really have championed, right, the one-for-one model. And they've benefited from it. Their brand has risen, revenue has risen, customer loyalty has risen, acquisition has risen. There's quantifiable metrics. But because of these companies, having a certified B, yes, everyone should, go through it, but there is an administrative, the process to go through it. But it's expected. It's expected now by us as consumers that as a company, we do not want to be supporting a company that's doing bad. That we want to support a company that's doing good. Again, the challenge is companies are doing it all the time, and we as consumers don't know that. So that's the gap, is that there's this opportunity around purpose-driven marketing that Nike and other institutions can start to know our customers, know who they are based upon the causes that we care about. That when I make that purchase to Nike, because I've made it, and I'll show you these scenarios in a second, and I can give $25 to my daughter's preschool, all of a sudden Nike knows I care about this preschool in Charlotte. Now Nike, because they have that info, can now match my donation. It's the same budget they were going to give away $110 million somewhere in the US. But now they're doing it in a way with purpose to really to attract customers, to retain customers, and most importantly, to drive revenue. The same budget, that 1x, is now a potential 3x multiplier. And that's essentially, our challenge that we have solved, and that what we promote is what happens if companies could personalize the one-for-one experience. The challenge with the TOMS and Warby Parker model, absolutely fantastic brands, fantastic what they're doing around the world, but what if I didn't want to give eyeglasses to a child in Africa? And again, I might be mixing up my models here in a minute, but what if I wanted to give eyeglasses to someone here in Greer Heights, in Charlotte? How do you personalize it in a way that the same giving, the same one-for-one, but it's actually something that matters to me? And that's what we do. And essentially, we're in the intersection of taking the nonprofits by enabling them to not only have the ability to raise more funds, to take advantage of the market as it relates to merchants, customers coming off the street to give, as it relates to the golf tournaments. We can take that same mulligan purchase and actually match it and tie it to a consumer company. Because now all of a sudden that company saw that I cared about Discovery Place, and I purchased a mulligan from them. So all of that now is connected, because what we focus on, and a lot of the trends that's happening in digital philanthropy is focusing on the consumer. What are you buying? And then how can I amplify that to go after revenue and funds that a nonprofit would never be able to go after? Because they get one check from the CSR person from the company, but they didn't get the check from the 60,000 employees that are sitting in the same building. So here's the scenarios today, and I will wrap up. One is, and this is actually what I talked about, you log into a sporting goods site to purchase a pair of running shoes. Upon checkout, to thank you for your purchase, the athletic company will donate $5 to your favorite nonprofit. All of a sudden, the company now has that data. They can see what nonprofit you care about. They can match your nonprofit. And ideally, again, instead of getting a 10% off coupon on your next purchase, you're going to get a $25 match to your favorite charity. Same thing with scenario 2. This is actually what we launched last year with several companies, but usually the holiday season tends to be the big giving season. Companies send out emails to their customers and say, thank you for your business, thank you for your loyalty. We have made a donation in your name to Habitat for Humanity. That is awesome. I actually support Discovery Place and YMCA Charlotte, right? So how do you tick and tie that now you can send a mass market email to all of your customers to thank that you're still doing it, you're still doing the same behavior. You're just now making it personal to your customer. And that, again, customer retention, increased loyalty, and we show and talk through that in a minute how that slide works. So, this is just an HBR quote that talks about the fact that we aren't no longer just consumers, that we're co-creators, that we can now partner with companies to help influence, to be members of the community, but most importantly, companies, there's a whole great article around this, that companies should be able to tap into us as that extra arms and legs, their reach out into the community. Because how many of us would sit there and say, hey, go to Dilworth Running Company, and if you buy Nike shoes, my kid got $25, right? So it's an effect that, going back to that ecosystem, all of us can benefit as an individual donor, as a nonprofit, and then as a company. So visual summary that summarizes that up, that everybody wins. And so really, our perspective and what we bring to bear in the market is this is the new ecosystem of corporate social responsibility. That a friend sends me the link to Second Harvest Food Bank, that I make the donation in seconds because my financial currency is stored in my profile. It is automatically matched by my employer, my former employer, let's say Accenture. It is matched now by Bank of America because I'm their customer. And then I walk into my local coffee shop like Amelie's or Nova's Bakery, I show them my tax letter, and I get a free cup of coffee. Because smaller merchants and mid-sized merchants will never write the $10,000, the $50,000 checks that a lot of companies will do, but they'll give away a free pastry, a free glass of wine all day long. And that's the end of the presentation. So I know I probably should have said this at the beginning, we were going to hold for all questions, so I apologize if there were questions throughout. I was told not to take any until the end. I probably should have said that up front. But that's what we do, and it's a fascinating world to be a part of right now. So thank you for your attention, and any questions or comments?